Live from Atlanta Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, the Ms. Lou Television Network brings you the 9th annual Peach Bowl Football Classic, featuring the University of North Carolina Tar Heels against the University of Kentucky Wildcats.
From the men who brought you basically a sports show, if your football fix wasn't met on Thursday night, it's time for an additional slice. This is basically a football show right now. Let's go!
Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, touchdown, Green Bay. Marshawn Lynch, still on his feet. Has blockers now. He's dancing his way to the touchdown. Miller, flushed. Watch the throw. Now he's going to do what he can with his legs. No, he will throw. Lobs it to the end zone. Touchdown!
Good evening and welcome, everybody. I'm Kirk Herbstreit along with Brent Musburger.
Good morning, football fans. It is going into week 15 of the NFL, and we're done with the college regular season, and we're ready for playoff talk. We'll get to that later. It was a great NFL weekend of football. The college stuff is just blowing our minds. So much stuff to talk about there with the playoff. So, Greg, we're gonna start with the NFL. We're gonna get the NFL out of the way, get kind of the perfunctory stuff out of the way, and then we're gonna go full force into some college playoff debate controversy. What happened? Oh my God, this committee. Who are they? Where's Ohio State? What happened to TCU? They were number 3. Now they're gone. Oh, geez, so much stuff.
So many directions to go on that college committee. It's just there's so many different ways to look at it. But yeah, it was. We were joking before we started. Gee, we wish we had something to talk about this week. We could do 2 shows easily out of just the college football playoff, I think.
Yeah, honestly, and this is something we can discuss later too in more depth. But people were worried that the playoff might make the season not as interesting, and just wait until the end. And some teams, the games might not matter as much. This one day alone, the selection of these playoff teams has given daily talk show hosts hours and hours of material to go over.
Oh yeah,
at least for this, and then in the weeks leading up to it later too. So this has done everything it needed to do for college football.
I can't remember being this involved, this engaged in a college football season in my whole life. And I was against the playoff for a very long time, but this has just. If it was possible to make the college football regular season more exciting, this playoff did it. It's just been incredible.
Yeah. And, I mean, I love all types of football, but this playoff is cemented as college football is my favorite
Absolutely.
form of football.
Absolutely.
But not far behind is the National Football League, Greg, and we will start with the NFL, where things are a little bit more streamlined, pretty straightforward. You win your games, you go on. There's no discussion of who gets to go where. And sometimes teams may not deserve it. But they're still getting there anyway. But we'll start with Thursday. And the Dallas Cowboys, Greg, they've avoided the 8-8 season.
Finally, huh?
Yeah, huh? They won 41-28 over the Bears in Chicago. The Bears, there's not much more to say about the Bears. The Jay Cutler conversation's been had.
Right.
Things just look like they're falling apart. I fully expect in the offseason this thing to be torn apart.
I would think so, because first off, I think Mark Trestman has proven that he is not a good NFL coach. He's just not getting the job done. There's a lot of offensive talent with that Bears team. Cutler, I guess, I've never seen a quarterback with less emotion. That just doesn't seem to care one way or the other. Maybe it's just his outward appearance, but yeah, this Bears team.
I think with Cutler too, it's been years of being beaten down.
Yeah, exactly.
Not necessarily physically, but just everything that happens with that Bears team, it always ends up being his fault. When maybe it's not really. And
he can't play defense. I mean, what's he supposed to do, right?
No, I think outside of maybe Tony Romo, there's no other quarterback that I can think of that gets brought down as hard on as Jay Cutler is.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. He never seems like he's been liked anywhere he's ever played, and especially Chicago. If Cutler throws 5 touchdowns in a game, they're asking why didn't he throw 6. It's one of those things. But this Bears team, I really missed the boat on these guys. I thought they would be a playoff contender, and they're clearly not.
No. But on the Cowboys side, 9-4. Congratulations. You're not going to be 8-8 for the first time in forever. You're still fighting for the division. And the thing that's scary, I mean, looking at the NFC, the 9-4, you know, if you're in the AFC, you're leading a division, or you're at least the very first wild card by a full game.
Exactly.
In the NFC, I mean, you have Philly and Dallas are both 9-4 right now, and they play each other next week. So winner of that probably wins the division.
Yeah.
Detroit's 9-4. Seattle's 9-4. And then you have Arizona, who's kind of slipping, and they'll probably be right in the wild card discussion here in probably a week or two. I mean, outside of the NFC South, which, you know, is its own problem, there are a hell of a lot of good teams right now in the NFC, and Dallas, you know, it's good that they've finally breached the 9-win plateau. Congratulations for that sort of mediocre accomplishment. But they got to keep winning here, or they're going to be could very easily finish out of the playoffs. I think actually they're at the bottom of the tiebreakers right now.
Well, I was just going to say,
if the playoffs started today, they would be on the outside looking in based on tiebreakers.
We've talked about it a lot on this show and on basically a sports show about the Cowboys and how they're always going to be, if things break the right way, they go 10-6, maybe 11-5. They're having that kind of season this year where things have kind of broken their way. But you look at them, do you really think this is a team that's built for success? I think it's just they're still the same 8-8 Cowboys they were last year, the year before. They've just had a couple bounces go their way this year. So, yeah. And the problem with this, if they do make the playoffs, which I don't think they're going to be honest, but if they do make the playoffs, that's going to lead the people in the front office and Jerry Jones into thinking this team's headed in the right direction. And I still think that they still need to do the maybe not as massive a blow-up as I originally thought, but I don't think that this is a sign of good things to come for these guys. That's what I would be worried about if I was a Cowboys fan.
Well, the thing is, now that they've got to 9, and I almost guarantee they'll get to 10 because they finished off at Washington. But they didn't lose to Washington at home earlier this year.
Yeah.
But I think even just getting to 9 is encouraging for Jerry Jones.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what. Yeah, and I just don't think that this isn't
even if they miss the playoffs, he'd still be encouraged. Be like, nah, we were a 9 or 10 win team. Any other year we get the playoffs, so we just gotta keep doing what we're doing. It's like, no, Jerry, that's not how this. Like, yes, you had a very good year from DeMarco Murray, and yeah, Tony Romo's fine. But what happens when you finally let him snap in half?
Exactly.
Instead of keep propping him up with toothpicks.
I mean, it's going to sound crazy to say that it's a bad thing that this team's being successful this year, but in the long term, the 5-year view for the Dallas Cowboys, this isn't what they needed to have happen this season. As crazy as that sounds.
They've never had a 5-year view on anything.
I agree. That's why I'm saying, I mean, Cowboys fans, don't get the idea that your team is headed on the upward tick here, because I don't think they are. I think it's just been a matter of a schedule that worked to your advantage and getting a couple of wins that, you know, one of those things where they could just as easily be, what are they, 13 games? They could easily be 6-7 right now or 7-6. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, they had I'm looking at their schedule right now. In terms of good wins, you know, you earlier in the season you thought beating New Orleans was probably a big win, but probably not anymore.
Right.
They beat Houston in overtime. Let's see. Oh, they won at Seattle. I mean, that's the big win.
That's a good win.
But they were tight with Houston. They lost in overtime to Washington. They were tight with the Giants 2 weeks ago.
They had to put together a furious comeback to beat the Rams back earlier in the season, if I remember right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they don't have any really signature wins outside the Seattle one, and they have a couple bad losses to Washington and I guess we can classify the San Francisco loss in Week 1 as a bad loss at this point.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, their schedule down the road, the next 2 weeks are difficult, and then they finish off with Washington. They're at Philly, and then home against Indy, and then at Washington to finish off the season. So 10 wins for sure. But if they finish 10-8 or 10-6, I don't think they make it.
No, probably not. And
because I mean, you still have the mix of Seattle and Arizona's already at 10.
Right.
Even if they slip out, and Detroit is still at 9-4, and
right.
they have a pretty easy schedule down the road.
Detroit's not going to go anywhere. Seattle right now is really just
Seattle's a team no one wants to play.
Right, they have risen from the grave this year, and all of a sudden they're looking a lot like the team that they were last year. So yeah, the Cowboys. It's a good season for them. It's an improvement from last year, but they could do all this, and like you said, they may not make the playoffs despite all of it. Now, granted, there's 3 weeks to go, and crazy things always happen the last 3 weeks of an NFL season, so I'm not writing them off just yet, but I wouldn't start printing up those playoff tickets just yet if I were the Cowboys.
Yeah. Let's move on to Sunday. We can talk about at least one crazy thing that happened in the early slate. It was the basically a football show bowl as the Indianapolis Colts marched into Cleveland. And I got to tell you, I was afraid there for the good majority of this game. Because in the first quarter, the Colts fumbled the ball in the end zone and it's 7-0. It's like, oh, jeez. And then then it was 14-0. Then it was 21-7. And it's like, oh, no, we're not just going to drop this game, right? We're not going to drop this turn of a game in Cleveland. And with 32 seconds left, Andrew Luck does his magic, finds was it T.Y. Hilton in the end zone?
I think it might have been. I don't remember.
And they pull it out. They tie the game with a touchdown, kick the extra point, and they hold on to win for a 25-24 victory. Greg, your Browns stealing defeat from the jaws of victory. What do we have to say about the end of the Brian Hoyer era in Cleveland?
Well, here's the thing about that game, and I think you'll agree with this. It had the Browns. The defense played great in that game for a good portion of it. They played great. They put 14 points on the board.
Yep.
But the offense couldn't keep the defense off the field. And that's going to be a problem if you're playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's a serious problem when you're playing a team with Andrew Luck as the quarterback on the other side and T.Y. Hilton and those receivers the Colts have. If the Browns had just been able to keep if they had 3 more first downs, they probably win this game. But that's the ineptitude of that offense, and that's just the way it is. I mean, and 3 things I took away from this game. First off, I think the Colts and the Browns are very similar talent-wise. Yeah. The main difference, and it's a huge one, is at quarterback. That's the difference between the Browns and the Colts at this point.
Yeah.
I think the Browns, maybe the defense has got a slight edge, but overall...
Yeah, I would say they have a bigger edge, but yeah.
But, overall, talent for talent, they're kind of the same kind of team, but it just shows you how important having a good quarterback is. The second thing I thought about is that Brian Hoyer has been just god-awful for, a stretch of about 4 or 5 games now.
Yeah.
Yet they absolutely refuse to go to Johnny Manziel, which made me wonder. I don't think Mike Pettin, I think he's done a really good job with a team that I don't think people expected a lot of coming into the season. Does he see something where he thinks, Manziel's not going to be any better than Hoyer?
No, I think they think that Johnny Manziel's a wild card. He could play really well, he could play badly, and he just simply plays different than Brian Hoyer does. So I think probably what the line of thought is, well, Brian got us to 7 wins. If we can pull out a couple here and stay in playoff contention, he's the guy to do it because we kind of built the offense as being a traditional drop back sort of thing. Whereas Johnny can go out and improvise, and that kind of changes the whole dynamic of it. So we don't really want to, go out there and ruin him and really burn their options. Because if they go to Johnny Manziel too early and then he's bad and then you got to go back to Brian Hoyer, it's like, well,
right.
What are you doing now? So I think they're just trying to exhaust the Brian Hoyer option because he's a free agent after this year, if I remember correctly.
He's going to be holding the clipboard for somebody next year. He's not going to be a starting quarterback in the league next year. I can tell you that right now.
Right, and so I think they're just trying to see how much they could actually get out of Brian Hoyer before they were eliminated from the playoffs. And they're not eliminated. I mean, they're 7-6. They're still a game out from the playoffs. But based on these playoff seedings, they're at the bottom of the tiebreaker. They're the bottom of the 7-6 teams right now. So I think, and they did name Johnny Manziel as a starter for this weekend. So I think they're kind of throwing in the towel and saying, you know what, Johnny, you got 3 games to earn next year's starting quarterback job, and show us that you're worth the pick we made on you. Show us that you're worth investing in for the future. And this is going to be a big 3 weeks for the Cleveland Browns and for Johnny Manziel.
Well, the Browns have to win every single one of those games to even have a shot right now. But to me, it's inexcusable that your defense puts 14 points on the board and you still lose. That is just inexcusable to me, and a playoff team doesn't do that. So I hope Manziel's the answer. I mean, the anemic offense is what's cost this team a shot at being a legitimate playoff contender this year. And I understand the logic. I even endorsed the logic last week of sticking with Hoyer because he's the more experienced of the two, and you don't want to look like you're giving up. Now it's time. You've got to move to Maniziel just to see what you've got, if nothing else. And if he wins 3 straight games, he's going to be the story of the year, or the last quarter of the season in the NFL. But that's what it's going to come down to.
I mean, you look at – let's see. Let me pull up the standings again. Where did they go? Okay. So right now, Cincinnati's 8-4-1, and they lead the division. Pittsburgh is 8-5, and they're the top wild card. Cleveland is 7-6. They're only a game behind Pittsburgh and a game and a half behind Cincinnati. They play Cincinnati this week. They play at Carolina the week after, and then they finish at Baltimore, a team that they lost to only by 2 points in week 3.
Right.
And Cincinnati, remember, they blew them out in Cincinnati on the Thursday night. But now both those teams have really kind of changed over these last, 4 games in between.
I got to think that Cincinnati game was the last good game Brian Hoyer played, I think.
Yeah, let's see. They had the 23-7 loss to Houston, then 26-24 win at Atlanta, 10 points against Buffalo. Yeah, it's not been great.
And that Atlanta win, let's be honest, if Mike Smith's not an idiot, the Falcons win that game. Yeah. Simple as that. That was a gift.
Right.
So
basically, the Browns could, in theory, very well win this division.
Well, it's going to take...
They're a game out of the wild card, a game and a half out of first place, which is strange to think.
And again, if Manziel, they have to win every game. They have no margin for error at this point.
You think that they have to go 10-6?
I think they absolutely have to go 10-6 to win the division. Yeah.
Because let's see, I'm gonna pull up all the team schedules right now. Because I think really the most dangerous team, Cincinnati's in the driver's seat, and they have Cleveland, and then they play Denver, and they're at Pittsburgh. So Cincinnati could choke this thing away really quick too.
Yeah, but Cincinnati in the driver's seat, to me, that's like riding with a drunk driver. It's not. Right. You're not so sure that you're happy with that.
Pittsburgh has Atlanta, Kansas City, Cincinnati.
Okay.
Ooh.
They could lose all 3 of those.
They could.
I mean, this Atlanta team.
Where's Baltimore? Baltimore has Jacksonville, Houston, Cleveland. Yeah,
see, but again, I've said all along, and I'm sticking with it. I still think Baltimore's the best team in that division, and they've got the easiest path the rest of the way out.
Yeah.
It's going to be. We'll know more about the AFC North as things go along. If you take the NFC South out of the equation with their records in the AFC North, it's the NFC North the NFC South except it's the AFC North. They're the same exact division, but They've been able to make hay against the NFC South, and that's why I think I saw a stat on this the other day that their record against the NFC South is incredible. Against everybody else, it's terrible.
Right.
The division as a whole. So again, none of these teams are good. They seem good because they have good records, but they're not good. They've been taking advantage of the NFC South.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that NFC North, or AFC North, the Bengals are still in first place, but man.
See, that's the thing. They had a chance to salt away the division, and they completely blew it.
I mean, I don't know what to do with either of these teams because the Steelers from week to week can look like world beaters or they can look like garbage. And the Bengals haven't looked good in weeks, but they still were managing to win some games here and there. And now they're only a half game up on the Steelers at 8-4-1. Steelers are 8-5, and they get routed at home 42-21. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger looked great. Antonio Brown was all over the place as always. Le'Veon Bell, 26 rushing yards, 26 rushes, 185 yards, 2 TDs. He was amazing too. So this Steelers team might be hitting its stride, or it could just be another one of those sharp upticks that will go away in a week.
Well, look at the score. Look at the box score of this game. Cincinnati was ahead 21-17 going into the fourth quarter. And the final score ended up being 42-21. They gave up 25 unanswered points in the fourth quarter at home.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens. It's just Cincinnati's had the best record all along. They've probably been the most consistent team out of that division. I still don't think they're the best team in that division. They're just too split personality. They're too nutty. I don't know what to make of them.
Yeah.
Same with the Steelers. Same with that whole. The only team that's really been consistent has been the Ravens.
Even the Ravens are kind of up and down too, though.
Yeah, but not as wildly. I don't think as the other.
Not as wildly, yeah. I mean, they win a game, they lose a game, but they're not. If they're winning, it's only by a little bit, and if they're losing, it's only by a little bit.
Right.
Like, they're not getting blown. The only blowouts on their schedule were the game at Tampa where they won, and then 3 weeks ago at Pittsburgh.
Right.
So everything else is pretty in line.
Yeah, it's just it's a bad division. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, people are like, oh well, how all these teams have 7 wins? What parity? It's like, not really. I mean, if you look at it, like, yeah, they got the wins, but not against each other, and not against anybody that matters. So
right, like I said, take the NFC South. There's NFC record against the NFC South out of the equation, and they become a really bad division. It's an illusion, as people say.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And actually, well, let's throw the Ravens in there, too. They get a 28-13 win at Miami. And, I mean, this was a big win in terms of the wild card race because San Diego, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore are all 8-5. So Baltimore is sitting on the outside right now with the tiebreaker. And, I mean, this was big. Now, Miami's only a game out, but there's still a game out, and they're still in the mix with all those other teams. And now they're still, clawing around, whereas the Ravens have a little bit more of a foothold in terms of, the wild card hierarchy right now.
They've had losses earlier in the year that were probably just as much of a problem to their playoff chase, but this is one they had to have, and they didn't get it.
Yeah.
And that's...
And, I mean, they were up 10-0 after the first quarter, 10-7 at half. It's a game they had to win.
Exactly.
But I mean, really, you break down the stats even further. The Ravens dominated this game, 447 yards to 249. Even time of possession, but they were all over the place with this Dolphins team. Man, I really wanted so much more for the Dolphins, but I don't know. They don't give it to me consistently.
They showed signs at times this year. But.
Definitely. Let's move on to the rest of the league. We'll round out some of these games real quick. The Rams beat Washington in Washington 24-0. Can we put the Rams in the NFC South? Can they take the NFC South representation?
Well, think about them for a second. How many other divisions in football would this team probably win right now? They'd win the AFC North, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. They would probably they're definitely winning the NFC South. NFC West, probably not. NFC East, I think I like their chances in the NFC East, but isn't this back-to-back shutouts for these guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 52-0 beating of the Raiders last week.
Yep.
So
yeah,
that's
I mean,
they beat 76 points. 76 points.
Teams. They're competitive with the good teams.
Right. They're a team that, boy, if they had a good quarterback, a consistent quarterback, and just a little bit more offense, how tough would they be? But just a real quick comparison, you look at the Cowboys, look at the Rams. The Rams, I think, are headed in the right direction, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, this is probably a building point, but right. I don't want to get bogged down in that again. But, yeah, very impressive. 2 shutouts in a row.
Yeah, the right direction, as in towards Los Angeles.
Yeah, that too.
Did you see the coin toss for this game, Greg?
I did not.
Did you hear about the coin toss?
I did not.
Okay, well, the Rams, they didn't send out their normal captains. They sent out Stedman Bailey, Janoris Jenkins, Michael Brockers, Zach Stacy, Greg Robinson, and Alec Ogletree. They are the 6 players on the active roster that were used to trade for RG3.
Ooh. Oh, that's cold.
Yeah, they were all the draft picks that ended up becoming Robert Griffin III.
Wow, there's a nice little FU to Dan Snyder, huh?
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow. That is some cold stuff right there, man.
I know, Jeff Fisher, evil mastermind.
I'm telling you.
And RG3 came on in relief in this game.
Oh, brother.
Because Colt McCoy was starting. Yeah, he just that franchise is such a mess.
Okay, real quick. 2 years ago, would you ever have thought you would utter the sentence, RG3 came on in relief of Colt McCoy?
No.
People would have said, "You guys, what are you guys drinking?" God. I've never seen it. Go ahead.
RG3's not with it's either Jay Gruden's not with his team next year or RG3's not with his team next year, right?
Or both.
Where would RG3 go? Where would you think would be a good fit for RG3?
I don't think
if it's not in Washington.
I don't think there is a good fit for him.
I don't think so anymore. I think he's been ruined.
I think I was just going to say the same thing. He's been ruined. I don't know what the poor guy. I mean, he's been beaten half to death, bounced in and out of the lineup. He's been blamed for everything that's wrong with the team. I wouldn't want him, but I tell you what, if you want to talk about a team that might be worth giving him a look, it's a team they played. I think the Rams might take a look at him if the price is right, if it doesn't cost much to get him. How funny would that be?
Could you imagine?
That would be the greatest, wouldn't it? But
oh God, I don't think so. I mean, they still need some offensive line help, so I don't know if that's the best place to put him. But yeah,
man, I can't. I think it's awesome that they did that with the 6 draft picks. That's hysterical. But if you need any further proof of how dumb Dan Snyder is, there it is. My goodness. Yeah. But all right.
Let's see. The Giants knocked off the Titans 36-7. Yay,
yeah,
Giants!
Big deal. Okay. What's next? Yeah.
The Titans. Actually, the thing that's important here is the Titans are 2-11. That puts them in a 3-way tie for last place with the Jets and Buccaneers and Jaguars. A 4-way tie for the number 1 overall pick, and the Raiders. 5-way tie for last place in the league.
I'll tell you what. I think Marcus Mariota to the Titans. That's an interesting move. You know what I mean? If they got him, because I don't think that they're completely bereft of talent there in Tennessee. But I always thought Ken Wisenhunt was a good coach. I don't think so anymore.
Yeah, I think Mariota to the Jets would be interesting too.
Yeah, Mariota anywhere would be interesting, but the Titans. Who
needs to trade up and get him?
Who's that?
The Eagles.
Who? The Eagles?
Yeah.
Oh God! Holy hell! Could you imagine?
Could you imagine a Chip Kelly quarterback running Chip Kelly's offense in the NFL?
Especially a guy big enough to play in the NFL running Chip Kelly's offense in the NFL.
Right. It's not Dennis Dixon.
Exactly.
It's Marcus Mariota.
Wow, that would be something.
Yeah, it would.
Not going to happen, but boy, would that be something.
No. Another one of the terrible, games that didn't really matter. The Jets and the Vikings, they played to overtime. Cool. And the Vikings pull out a 30-24 win at home. They're 6-7.
They're respectable and great uniform matchup. I'll say that. That was a great uniform matchup. It will make my list this week.
Oh.
It will make my list this week, yes.
Little teaser.
Yeah.
One that may not make your matchup lineup, and really kind of throwing a wrench into everybody's thoughts about the stupid league. The Panthers and the Saints. The Saints have now lost 4 consecutive home games in a 41-10 beatdown by the 4-8-1 Panthers.
I just want to throw in really quick that the Saints have lost their 4th straight home game, came right on the heels of the statement RG3 went in to relieve Colt McCoy. That's the season it's been in the NFL, folks.
Yeah. So the Panthers squarely back in the conversation here in the NFC South.
Yeah.
The Saints are at 5-8. The Falcons are 5-8. The Panthers are 4-8-1. They're a half game behind.
Unbelievable. We joked a couple weeks ago. We thought that somebody would crawl their way to 8-8 to win this division.
Impossible.
But at this point, I got to think we're getting a 6-10 division winner. I really do.
The only way any of these teams get to 8-8, the Panthers can't, but the Saints and Falcons would have to win out. And so let's break it down. I mean, the Falcons played on Monday night, but they got blown out by the Packers until the Packers didn't care and let the Falcons back into it late.
Oh, see, I don't see it that way. We'll talk about it when we get to that game. Go ahead.
Okay. So Atlanta's 5-8, New Orleans is 5-8, and Carolina's 4-1. Atlanta hosts Pittsburgh, and they go to New Orleans, and they host Carolina. So either New Orleans or Atlanta has to get to 6 wins because they both play each other.
Right.
New Orleans is at Chicago, home against Atlanta, and then at Tampa. I see that Chicago game is it's Monday night this week. I don't know what to do with that because we saw the Bears kind of roll over and die, but it's in Chicago. The Saints looked terrible last week.
But here's the thing, 3-4 weeks ago, beginning of the season, we're like, yeah, the Bears win this game because it's the Saints on the road in December.
Right.
But guess what? They've gone on the road late in the season,
beat Pittsburgh.
and they've won this year, so you can't really use that. And they've lost 4 straight at home. This division is such a disaster. But gosh, is it fun to watch? I mean, I want everybody to lose because I want the worst record possible to win this thing. Because you're going to get a team that's going to be 6-10, 7-9, probably going to get a home game. They're going to host what would it be, the lowest seeded wild card?
The highest seeded wild card.
Or highest seeded wild card, excuse me.
Which now would be Seattle.
It almost has to be the Saints, doesn't it?
Right.
Just based on that, but I don't know.
I mean, honestly, though, between the Falcons having to play Pittsburgh and New Orleans having to play in Chicago, I might just like the Panthers, who play Tampa Bay this week. They host Cleveland, and then they finish up at Atlanta. And they only lost to Atlanta 19-17 in Week 11.
Those are 3 very winnable games for the Panthers, and 7-8-1 takes this division. Absolutely takes it.
Oh yeah, no, that's not even a question. So really, I think the team that has the destiny in their hands is the Panthers. If they win out, they're fine. I don't see any way the Saints or Falcons win out.
No. The team that the best chance to win out, probably the Panthers.
You say 6-10 wins this division. I don't think so. I think it has to be 7.
Probably,
unless the Panthers drop all their games, then Atlanta would only have to beat New Orleans, and then that'd be it.
Here's the thing: the way this division's gone all season, the only thing that makes any sense at this point is for the Panthers to win out and win this thing. After everybody had buried them 3 weeks ago, that's just the way it has to turn out, right? It can't go any other way because that's just perfect. It sums up the NFC South perfectly for them to rise from the dead and win this thing at 7-8-1.
I mean, could you imagine the Falcons marching into Charlotte? Or no, they host the final game of the year. Say the Falcons are 6-9, and the Panthers are 6-8-1. And they go into Atlanta in that final week of the season in an NFC South championship game.
Well, John Gruden made a really good point. I don't know if you heard this last night on the Monday night game. He said that in this division, you could make the playoffs and get a top 10 draft pick all in the same season. How nice is that?
Well, wait, does it work like that?
Yeah.
No, if you make the playoffs, don't they put you in the back?
Yeah, but it still goes by record. To a certain degree, I mean, you can't say, okay.
Or do they only do that with the Super Bowl champ or the conference finalists?
I don't know how. I think
they put you at the back. I'm pretty sure they still put you at the back.
Not if you. No, come on. If they go 7-8-1, they're going to pick ahead of a team that went 8-8 or whatever. I don't
know.
Well, I don't know if it's possible or not. But boy, it would be funny if that's what happened. They get not maybe a top 10 pick, but they could get a really good draft pick and win the division in the same year. You don't see that happen a whole lot.
Yeah.
Unless it's by trade, obviously. But just to have it naturally happen doesn't really happen.
Yep. Let's scoot on down the rest of these early games. The Lions with a big win over the Buccaneers, 34-17. The Lions are winning the games they're supposed to this year. Congratulations, Detroit.
Quietly 9-4. Nobody talking about them a lot either. But they do have that big showdown with Green Bay at the end of the season.
Yeah, but you know what? Just based on the way the standings look, I think they make the playoffs.
I think so too.
Because let's see who their schedule down the stretch is: Minnesota, at Chicago, and at Green Bay.
Well,
they should be 11-4 going into the Green Bay game.
You would think, yeah.
Yeah.
If they go 11-5, they're in. I think 11 wins rarely misses the playoff. It does happen occasionally, but rare.
Yeah,
11-5 doesn't make it.
I think the only one that I can remember is the Patriots a few years ago. It was the Matt Castle year. They went 11-5 and didn't make the playoffs.
The Broncos and I remember this because the Browns won the division at 8-8 that year. The Broncos won 11-5 and 85 and missed the playoffs.
Yeah,
because
I bet it was a different playoff system back then, right?
Yeah, not as many teams, obviously, but yeah. So the Broncos won. That's the only 2 times I can remember it ever happening where an 11-win team didn't make it.
Yeah. Let's see. To finish off the early slate, the Texans beat the Jaguars 27-13. Congratulations, Texans. The Texans, quietly enough, they're still right in the thick of that wild card discussion.
Yeah, they are.
Somehow, some way. I don't think they make it in, but
no.
Hold on. Who do they play? I think they play Indy they play Indy this week. Indy, Baltimore, Jacksonville.
They might get lucky.
They could get to 8-8 for sure.
Yeah,
because I think they can beat Baltimore. They can beat Jacksonville. If they want to be in the playoff discussion, they have to beat the Colts this week.
Right. I just want to ask, how good would J.J. Watt be if Jadeveon Clowney hadn't been hurt all season? I mean, he's already the best thing I've seen since Lawrence Taylor. I mean, how good would he be?
How much better could he be if he had Jadeveon Clowney?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, or would he be better with Jadeveon Clowney? I mean, I'm assuming Clowney would play. I think he played well in the game he played in, right?
Yeah, I mean, we just have to think whether Clowney takes away some of the sacks or whatever. But
that's true.
But even still, they're using him as a tight end in the goal line, and he's still catching touchdowns.
He's not, and these aren't catches where he's wide open and just has to hang on to the ball. I mean, he's making catches. He's making plays. The guy's amazing.
No, I mean, if it wasn't for Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, he'd be the MVP.
Yeah. But you see, and again, this is a debate we can have from basically a sports show. I don't think that quarterbacks. You've got to have a separate category because there's always going to be a quarterback every year, the most valuable player. And because
so you want like a Cy Young for?
I guess something like that. Yeah, something along those lines. I don't know, but that's another debate for another day.
I mean, they have Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, if he doesn't win that, it'll be the greatest miscarriage of justice in sports history.
If he doesn't win it unanimously,
right,
it'll be a travesty. I can't think of anyone else that you would put ahead of him right now. He's the biggest beast I've ever seen. In terms of defensive linemen. Well,
I've seen one other guy that dominated the way he has in defense, and that was Lawrence Taylor, and he was pretty good too.
But he was a linebacker too.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a D lineman, this is a defensive end that's getting interceptions, that's sacking the quarterback, that's getting pass deflections, that's catching touchdowns.
Well, and those interceptions are great too because he's outrunning guys. I mean, this isn't like he's rumbling, bumbling, stumbling. He's out there, he's kicking it in the afterburners and outrunning guys to the end zone on these touchdowns. Amazing.
He's just a beast of a man.
Absolutely.
He's a guy that I'd want on my side.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, can the Colts somehow get him? Because I really don't like going against him. Like, really, the only reason I'm afraid of this week is because I know J.J. Watt's out there looking to take Andrew Luck's head off.
Real quick story about the boards and J.J. Watt. A few years ago, we had a mock draft on the boards, on the Creamer boards, and I took J.J. Watt as my number one pick. And everybody's like, it's an interesting pick because I didn't have a very high slot. I look like a genius now in that draft because look how good he became. But anyway, anybody would love to have J.J. Watt. And I think that if the Texans can get a good quarterback and they get Jadeveon Clowney back next year, and I think they're going to be real tough.
To the late afternoon games, to Denver, where the Bills made a game of this thing against the Broncos, but 3 touchdowns by C.J. Anderson?
Yeah,
leads the Broncos to a 24-17 win over the Buffalo Bills.
C.J. Anderson has saved my fantasy football season this year. Absolutely. I had no running. I've got a team with Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, Julio Jones are my wide receivers, right? No running game at all. And then all of a sudden I see C.J. Anderson. I'm like, why not? He's going to be the top back, and he has just been a gift. He's been incredible.
You know what? This is something that Bill Simmons and talked about with Cousin Sal on his podcast yesterday. And really a reason – guys like C.J. Anderson are the reason that I hate fantasy football sometimes. Because, I go out and get Jonas Gray, and he hasn't seen the field in 3 weeks after scoring 4 touchdowns against the Colts. But then C.J. Anderson, who the hell is that, gets 3 touchdowns this week and is, the leading running back. And it just – at least I hate fantasy with running backs because you never know who the hell is going to be good.
Oh, absolutely not.
You know LaShawn McCoy, Jamal Charles, but even they go up and down.
Right.
But you get these guys that just come in and they're like, oh yeah, I'm the number 1 running back now and I'm just going to score 3 touchdowns. Why? Who? You
cannot count on running back production for your fantasy football team because you're right. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah,
you just never know. I had Eddie. I've got 2 teams. I had Eddie Lacy on my other one, and he's been he's had a pretty solid season, but yeah, it's C.J. Anderson's just been amazing. I mean, and the funny thing is too, one of the knocks on Manning has always been that when he gets down close, he wants to throw touchdown passes. He doesn't like to hand off and let running backs get touchdowns. I think C.J. Anderson's proven that's not the case here, but who knows? But the Broncos, they get a win. That was probably, I don't know who they play next week or if it was just one of those things. The Bills are a good defense, but, Broncos just keep winning. That's what they do.
Broncos are actually at San Diego this week.
Okay, so they might have been looking past this one a little bit.
Yeah, they finish up at San Diego, at Cincinnati, and home against Oakland. Moving on to the other later games. Good slate of late games.
Yeah, for once.
Chiefs Cardinals down in Glendale.
Yeah.
This was a bad football game.
Yeah.
Like for both sides. And credit to the Cardinals defense for picking it up in the second half. But man, Drew Stanton, you're not the guy.
No.
Like he made some good throws late to kind of get them into field goal range over and over and over again. But
not the guy.
They're lucky to have won this game. Who do they play the Rams on Thursday this week?
That's not an easy game.
No,
not at all.
No, and I think, is it in St. Louis? Yes, it's in St. Louis on Thursday. That's not an easy game. You know, if they can't pull this game out, they're losing the division.
Oh yeah,
they might just miss the playoffs because they host Seattle the week after. I'm going to actually be at that game, Sunday night game.
Cool.
And then they finish up at San Francisco. Now, San Francisco's out. San Francisco's done, and we'll talk about that awful pile of crap in a minute. But this is a must-win game for the Cardinals. If they want to win the division, they have to win this week.
Absolutely.
Because if they don't, then they're going to be 10-9 or 10-4.
10-4.
And then
right.
Seattle's going to come in on fire, knowing that they need to beat them.
Right.
And they already beat them once in Seattle. And, you know, that Seahawks defense is just going to eat Drew Stanton.
Oh, it's going to be – and, you know, and Ellington's out for the Cardinals. At least he was last I checked. They're in bad shape.
Out, and Fitzgerald's kind of shaky still. And they lost Cromartie last night, too. So they lost a little bit on the defense. And Patrick Peterson has been bad in the last few weeks.
Yes, he has.
He hasn't looked good at all.
Nope.
So the Cardinals' defense is kind of stuttering. This thing could go south just so fast because they've been leading the whole NFC, the whole league for the whole season. And these final 3 weeks, it could all just fall out from underneath them.
Well, I think they've ridden that really good defense about as far as they can go without having any kind of offense to back it up.
Yeah,
that's what they've done, and now
they needed Carson Palmer so badly.
Right, and now they're playing against the big boys, and all of a sudden it's getting a lot tougher. And Drew Stanton, he might fall out of bed one day and accidentally have a good game, but you can't count on him. You know, they're in trouble. I mean, as weird as that sounds to talk about a 10-3 team being in trouble, they're in trouble right now because the Seahawks team.
That's the state of the NFC too. That's the state of the NFC to say that they're in trouble.
Yeah, and this Seahawks team, they're not going away like we thought they were a few weeks back. That's not happening. No. Yeah, this is a must-win. They've really got to kind of win out, I think, at this point.
I mean, the positive for them going into that Seattle game is with this win, they're 7-0 at home this year, undefeated at home. So, see how that holds up over the last few weeks. I'm not having a good feeling about it as a
you know, and I'm sure we'll get to this game in a minute. But the Seahawks went in and dominated a pretty good Philly team this week too.
Yeah. Let's go over that. I mean, the Seahawks 24-14. Philly was up a little early, but the Seahawks just started rolling in the second quarter, and it never looked back. The defense looked great. Russell Wilson had a good game. They're on fire right now.
Yeah. They were. What would they? At one point, they were. I want to say 6-4. The Seahawks.
I think it was worse than that.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, we were at the point we really thought they were maybe in danger of not even making the playoffs.
Right. Well, they went through that stretch where they lost back-to-back games against Dallas and St. Louis.
Right.
They were 3-3.
Okay.
And then they ended up being 6-3. They lost to Kansas City, and they were 6-4. Yeah. And then they've won the last 3 games here in pretty dominant fashion, at least defensively.
Exactly.
19-3, 19-3, and then 24-14 over Arizona, San Francisco, and Philly.
And the thing about the Seahawks, too, is that they have enough offense to ride a good defense. Now, Russell Wilson's not Aaron Rodgers. He's not Andrew Luck. He's not Manning or Brady. But he's still good enough that if you put him in a Cardinals uniform, they're probably in good shape right now. That's the difference between the two teams.
Yeah.
And with Marshawn Lynch and that. They're
and it's not even really Russell Wilson throwing.
Yeah.
It's him being able to run.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, you look at their overall stats. They're 29th in passing yards, but they're first in rushing yards. And then the defense is first in opposing passing yards, third in opposing rushing yards.
And when that defense gets rolling, man, oh man, it's something. It's just incredible to watch.
They're tough, and they're playing right at the right time, and that's just the team nobody wants to play.
No, I can tell you right now, as a Green Bay Packers fan, I am hoping and praying that the Packers get home field because I do not want them to have to go to Seattle to play in the playoffs if they get that far.
I don't think that's going to matter.
It helps. You're looking for any edge you can get with these guys, you know.
But I mean, even if it's still Seahawks Packers in Lambeau for an NFC Championship,
that's not an automatic win for the Packers. I'm just thinking if I've got to play them, I'd rather do it in Lambeau than in Seattle.
Yeah, true.
I don't want to play them at all. I hope somebody upsets them early.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned the 49ers and 24-13 loss to the on the other side of the bay in Oakland. Derek Carr looked pretty decent for the Raiders, 3 touchdowns, but God, the 49ers.
And
can we just get rid of Colin Kaepernick?
I do want to point out something about the 49ers though, because they are wasting a great defense.
Oh yeah.
They have scored their highest point total of the season so far has been 31 points. And that happened way back in October against the Rams. Since then, they've scored 10. Okay, they got 27 in a win against the Saints, 16, 17, 3, 13. That's not a slump. That's because your quarterback sucks. That's what that is.
Yep.
They've got weapons, too. I mean, they've got Crabtree. They've got Anquan Bolden. They've got Vernon Davis. Frank Gore's having a good season. But Colin Kaepernick, wow, that's just not a good player.
No. He's outlived his run. You know, it's
absolutely.
And I mean, he's visibly frustrated too. And it might be one of those things like an RG3 situation where he's damaged. Maybe not physically like RG3 is, but mentally, he might just be checked out. And people know what he does. People know what he does now.
Yeah.
You know, it's not hard to get on him. You pressure him a little bit, and you make sure he doesn't run anywhere. And even then, his running isn't where it used to be. So.
Yeah, but that's the thing. If you can manage to contain him and keep him in the pocket, you've got nothing to worry about. Simple as that. That's all you've got to do to beat these guys, and everybody's figured that out. We talked about it a year or two ago. The NFL, they catch up quick, and guys like him, unless they can adjust their game accordingly, they're not going to last, and he's proof positive of that.
To the Sunday night game where the Patriots and Chargers, the Chargers were in this thing for a while, and then the Patriots decided to be the Patriots, and Tom Brady decided to be Tom Brady, and the Patriots 10-3 now, tied with the Cardinals for the best record in all of football, or tied with the Broncos and Cardinals, for the best record in all of football.
And
tied
Packers.
with the Broncos, huh?
And Packers.
It's Packers.
Yeah.
Just Packers. Yeah. 23-14. Patriots keep patrioting, I guess.
What this does to me is it makes that win the Chargers got against the Ravens last week really important now, because if they had lost that, then they lose this one, they're probably done. But
yeah, San Diego's still in the 6th seed if the playoffs were to start today.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what to do with the San Diego team either. They're another one of those up and down teams.
I think they've got enough talent that if they're working, they can play well, but they're kind of inconsistent, which is a thing throughout the league, really. But they've shown they can play good football, but they haven't shown they consistently play good football, which is their problem.
Yeah, I agree. But to the Monday night game where, I guess, Greg, the best team in football, would you say? The Green Bay Packers? Maybe?
Best offense at home in football.
Best offense at home in football.
In football, yeah, absolutely.
They got up big over the Falcons in the first half, and slowly let them catch back up in the second half. I thought it was the Packers, just kind of easing up on the gas. But what did you see?
I saw the same problems I've seen with the Packers defense a lot over this season and even last season. They have a tough time. Good receivers get open, and their secondary. They just what the Falcons did. And it might be a little bit that the Packers just let off the gas too, but I thought they kind of exposed the Packers defense. Julio Jones, my goodness, he just went off on those guys last night.
I think, but this is also something that gives me some faith in the Falcons, because I think of the 3 teams in that NFC South, I think they're the team that can put up points better than the other 2.
Absolutely.
So I think that'll keep them in games. It'll give them a shot. Because, I mean, it might even give them a shot in like a first-round playoff game if they could just explode for 37 points.
Yeah.
At home against whoever they play.
Well, they've got, Julio Jones is a great wide receiver. And, Matt Ryan's a pretty solid quarterback. But
right.
I just think that the Packers defense, it's been worried me all year. Yeah, it played better. But last night, and again, it might have just been that they were up 31-7 at half and kind of took their foot off the gas. But, boy, in that second half, the Falcons were just moving the ball left and right. They could do whatever they wanted, basically. So that concerns me a little bit. But they still got the win. And
still got the win. Still on top of the division. Still on top of the NFC. Right now, your playoff teams in each conference: Arizona, Green Bay, Philly, Atlanta, and then Seattle, Detroit, Dallas, tied for that final spot at 9-4. Also, in the AFC, New England, Denver, Indy, Cincinnati, and then Pittsburgh and San Diego are 8-5. Baltimore also 8-5, and there is 5 teams at 7-6, a game behind. But forget about the NFL playoffs. Those are done and boring, and who cares? Let's talk about some college football playoffs. Let's get into the most important football story in many years, to be perfectly honest. The college football playoff final rankings were released on Sunday. We actually have the rankings to talk about this week.
Absolutely.
And we have our 4-team playoff. And they were going down one by one, and we all kind of knew where the top 3 were going to lie. Number 1 was the Alabama Crimson Tide. You expected that. Number
Absolutely.
2 was the Oregon Ducks. You pretty much expected that. But here's where things get a little bit screwy. Last week, the number 3 team was TCU. Well, number 3 this week was Florida State. They finished undefeated. They had really a drag-out game with Georgia Tech in the ACC championship game. I mean, Georgia Tech was with them the whole way. I think part of it was just because of that running game. It's hard to prepare for. Georgia Tech was running it as efficiently as they possibly could.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Florida State, they finally kind of figured it out, and they just showed that they had more talent than Georgia Tech, and they ended up winning by a score or two. And you know what? But credit to Florida State. That was probably the best game they had played all year that I had seen, and they looked good, and they deserve to be in the top 4, being undefeated national champs. So then the number 4 spot, well, TCU was number 3. They could just drop to number 4. I could see that. I mean, they won by 52 points. But Baylor, they beat a number 9 Kansas State team by a couple scores. Where did they go? But Ohio State, they're third. They were 5th, and then they have their number 3 quarterback come in, and they beat Wisconsin 59-0. Man, who's going to be that number 4 spot? Well, Greg, it's your Buckeyes.
Surprised me as much as anybody, I got to admit. I did not expect it.
The Ohio State Buckeyes make it into the number 4 slot in the college football playoff, giving us the final semifinal matchups in the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day. Alabama will play Ohio State. I'm sorry, Greg. And in the Rose Bowl, Oregon will play Florida State Seminoles. Baylor finishes at number 5, and TCU drops all the way to number 6.
Okay. Well, go ahead. You got more?
No. Go ahead. You can kick us off here.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of things to look at here. Mm-hmm. One of which I didn't realize they were doing this until they said they did this week, but I guess the committee hits the reset button every week. So using that logic, the prior week's rankings meant nothing. If that's in fact the case, then sure, I think they did the right thing here.
But the problem is we don't live in that vacuum.
No.
This is something people have talked about for a lot of times, and I kind of blew it off. Like, no, we like the rankings. We need to know what's happening. I don't think we do.
No.
Because the thing that I'm fine with the playoff teams. And I said all along I was fine with Baylor eventually finishing ahead of TCU because of the head-to-head. But here's the thing. If TCU was number 3 last week, they win by 52 points, so you drop them by 3 spots?
That's where I run into trouble, too.
That doesn't hold water with me.
No, again, because, like I said, if the rankings don't mean anything, then don't put them out.
Right. And,
Simple as that.
And the other thing was for the whole time head-to-head wasn't really important to them because, TCU just looked like the better football team. And I could buy that.
Yeah.
But head-to-head didn't mean anything
until it did.
It meant something.
Right.
Right. And so that's the dropping of TCU bothers the hell out of me. And it almost gets me to the point of why are we having these guys do the rankings every week if they're not going to matter?
TV.
I know, but look at college basketball. They just use the AP poll all year, and then they have the committee come in at the end and pick the teams. Why can't we do that here? Just use the AP poll every week. You can have an AP poll release show if you so desire.
Well, here, I'll stop you right here. Why you don't want to do that? Because if you do that, you've got Florida State ranked number 1, and I don't think anybody wants that.
But you could buy that because they're an undefeated reigning national champ.
Yeah, but you see,
and even if you look at the AP poll right now, Florida State's 2. They're not number 1.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I think the committee did a really good job where they screwed themselves by releasing the rankings every week. If you had just gone without any idea other than pure speculation of who was where, and they came up with these 4 teams, I don't think anybody has a problem with it.
No.
The problem is that they had these rankings that they were hyped up every Tuesday night on ESPN.
Yep.
And we go all along, and I mean, was there anybody out there thinking that TCU would drop 2 spots after everything? No,
and especially because I mean they made the point of dropping Florida State in 2 consecutive weeks. They moved TCU up to 3. And then you drop them for beating a team by 52 points?
Right.
And then they go and will say, oh, well, but we were looking at the whole body of work and et cetera, et cetera. But so what changed from last week to this week? Like I can buy Ohio State playing their way in with a 59-0 beatdown with a 3-string quarterback over a good Wisconsin team with a Heisman Trophy winner and all that. I can buy that. I can buy Ohio State playing their way in. I can't buy TCU playing their way down 3 spots by beating a team by 52 points.
Right. Again, look, I'm an Ohio State Buckeyes fan. I went to college there. I'm a huge fan, but I wanted to make the playoff. I didn't want to make it like this. After Barrett went down in the Michigan game, everybody thought they're done. They were 4-point underdogs in this game. And they set them up to where any win at all would be impressive, but to come in and just eviscerate a team like they did, all of a sudden they looked, and again, beating anybody 59-0 unless it's a real cupcake, but if you're beating a legitimate team by that score, it's impressive. I don't care who does it. But the fact they did it behind a 3rd-string quarterback when no one thought they were going to do it really helped their cause, I think. And I also think, too, that not having a championship game in the Big 12 hurts the Big 12. So there's a lot of factors here.
Because the thing to take note with that is that, I mean, all year the Big 12 had their slogan of one true champion, and then
except when there's not.
Well, right, they were going to have one true champion, but then all of a sudden, I guess halfway through, they decided, well, no, if they finish tied, we're going to name them co-champs.
Well, because they wanted 2 teams in the playoff, right? And they tried to hedge their bets to get that.
They presented the TCU and Baylor as co-champions to the committee, and as far as I can tell, when I saw the interview with Jeff Long, who's the chairman of the committee, he's also the athletic director of Arkansas. What he was saying was basically they presented that to us and we took that into account. And he didn't say it outright, but it sounds like to me that they held that against them, that they weren't an outright champion, that they didn't have to, play a championship game or anything like that. But I mean, they're using the totality of the thing, and the other thing that they probably put against Baylor and TCU at the end of the day was their non-conference schedule.
Yeah,
because Baylor had the worst non-conference schedule out of all FBS teams, in terms of strength of schedule.
Yeah, I mean they played some real cupcakes.
Right, and both TCU and Baylor played an FCS opponent, whereas Ohio State did not. And Ohio State's one loss was to a power conference team. Now, yes, Virginia Tech ended up 6-6, and they lost to freaking Wake Forest in overtime, 9-3 or whatever. But that was the thing that was holding me back against Ohio State. Is just looking at the losses, Ohio State had the worst loss of the 3 teams.
Absolutely,
easily, far and away.
Of the one loss, I go even further. Of the one loss teams, out of all of them, they had the worst loss.
Right,
I think. Yeah,
and TCU had the best loss, a 3-point loss to Baylor, which, again, didn't matter all of a sudden until it did. So there's so many things. And the other thing is when they dropped Florida State last week, we had all assumed that they were doing it to try and prep us for the fact that they were going to try and make the semifinal matchups advantageous for ticket sales, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what we figured. They would have Alabama play Florida State in the Sugar Bowl because it's in the South, and they'd have Oregon play either the Texas schools or Ohio State in Pasadena because it wouldn't be advantageous necessarily for those schools, but you could get a traditional Rose Bowl matchup with Pac-12, Big Ten, or you could get the Texas schools to get out there easier. And then if they go to the championship game, all they have to do is drive to Dallas. It's not a big deal. Right. But then all of a sudden that didn't matter either because now you're sending Florida State all the way across country and you're sending Ohio State down into the belly of the beast in the Sugar Bowl. And so these things that we had been focusing on from this committee all year and saying, well, this is what they're looking for. This is what they want. All of a sudden those things didn't matter at the end of the day. And it mattered with Alabama, Oregon, and Florida State. But then when it came to deciding between Ohio State, Baylor, TCU, they decided to, flip the script.
Well, I think that Ohio State, they benefited, like I said, they benefited from doing something no one expected them to do. They benefited from playing a conference championship game.
Yeah.
And the Big 12 kind of shot themselves in the foot with the co-champions thing because they got greedy. I think if they had stuck to just look, at the end of the season, the head-to-head matchup is, Baylor wins the Big 12. Right. It's the out-of-conference schedule hurt them, but again, I think if we had not known a single ranking up until the ones that came out on Sunday, no one has a problem with this. All things being equal, if we didn't know ahead of time. But if the rankings don't mean anything, then don't do the rankings. I understand it's a great TV thing. It gives us a lot to talk about every year, but it just looks bad. It really looks a lot like all of a sudden, TCU was number 3 last week, and now they're number 6. Mm-hmm. And, Ohio State had a more impressive win by, 7 points? Not that much more impressive.
They were beating a ranked team in a neutral site with a Heisman Trophy candidate.
Well, that's true, too, but I also think Wisconsin was grossly overrated because they're not that – I don't know. There's just a lot of things to look at here. I think that if they're going to do this, if you're going to do the rankings, don't do them every week because that really screwed things up, or make it very clear from the very start. These are a week-to-week thing. They do not carry over. That's fine, too, but they made it sure seem like TCU was 3 last week, and all of a sudden they're 6 for no other reason than because. And that just doesn't hold water.
And Dan Patrick on the not Dan Patrick, but Chris Mannix on the Dan Patrick show interviewed Bob Bowlesby, the Big 12 commissioner.
Yeah, I heard that.
And he even asked him, going into the week, did you expect to have at least one of your teams in there? And he's like, well, yeah. TCU was at 3. There was no way to expect them to drop, let alone drop them out, let alone all the way to number 6. And so even if the people that are involved in this thing don't necessarily understand what's going on, then I don't know. It's a mess. But the other thing that this kind of shows is, not necessarily with the co-champions, but it shows the inherent flaw in this system where you have a Power 5 of conferences, but only 4 spots.
Right. So
every year you're going to have a Power 5 conference champion, at least one, not in your playoff.
Well,
that team or teams in this case is going to have a very legitimate gripe to not playing like it. If we go through it, did Baylor or TCU, are they really better than Oregon or Alabama? Maybe, maybe not, but we won't ever know now because they won't get the shot. They won't get the opportunity. And I think what this has shown is that I think we're always talking about how to maybe expand the playoff and that it's inevitable. I think going through it for 1 year, I don't think we should ever go to 8. I think 8 is too much. I think 6 might work perfectly.
But then you've got the issue of bye weeks. Who deserves a bye week?
Right.
How do you determine that?
You do the top 2 teams.
Okay.
Whoever's ranked number 1 and whoever's ranked number 2, you get the buys. I don't think that's too out of the question.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you have Florida State say, well, we're undefeated. Why don't we get a bye? And
right.
I would understand that, but, if you're going to be undefeated one more time. I mean, I don't think Florida State's going to win the next game anyway, so what does it matter? But
here's the thing. I think that overall, again, and you've got to wipe out all the previous rankings. I think they did a good job. I could argue, do I think Ohio State's better than Baylor and TCU? I don't know if they're necessarily better, but they're certainly equal to them.
Baylor's fine because Baylor was kind of in that spot all year, and they lost a worse game to West Virginia, and by 14 points, I think. And, that makes sense. That's fine. Baylor being where they are is fine. But I had said all along that, Baylor should have been ahead of TCU the whole time because they beat them.
Right.
But they made it. The rankings showed that didn't matter, that they thought TCU was better. And they thought TCU was better than Florida State. They thought they were better than Ohio State. They thought they were better than Baylor. Until all of a sudden they weren't, and they put them behind all 3 of those teams. It doesn't make sense that they do that.
Well, again,
really, I mean, there's a lot of smaller problems, and we're kind of going through them. That is my big problem with this thing. You can't just drop a team 3 spots because you felt like it.
And that's sure what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, because you had all these things that supposedly mattered, but you said, no, well, they don't really. We're just going to pick the 4 best teams. And then all of a sudden TCU is not one of the 4 best teams?
Well,
because they beat up a cupcake by 52 points? It's a conference game. What do you want them to do?
I don't know. It's confusing. Again, unless you take them at their word that the rankings were meaningless week to week and it was just a made-for-TV event, then sure, they probably got it right. But no one told us that until everybody's going, hey, what the hell just happened here? Oh, well, forget the other rankings. They didn't mean anything in the first place, except that they sure looked like they did for all the weeks coming up to this.
Right.
And that's the thing that...
If we're going to have the pomp and circumstance and the discussion,
right,
and all of the things that went into these ranking shows and this rankings process,
precisely,
then you make it seem like it's a pretty important deal. You make it seem like it's very important that they're flying in every week and they're meeting for hours and hours and watching all the games and blah blah blah, and you have this big primetime thing every Tuesday. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't really matter because we just do them every week.
Pay no attention to what we said last week because it doesn't mean anything, except that it did all season until you needed it not to mean anything.
It didn't mean anything all season except for really, I mean, you look at the rankings all season and everything was pretty logical. Teams kind of move up and down. It was fine. You win, you move up, you lose, you move down, and maybe you kind of flip them. Everything was kind of in line. These are the only ones where things kind of went different directions.
Well, okay, here's a question. All right. They clearly thought Florida State was good enough to be in the playoff this year. So what happened, again, if the rankings don't mean anything and it's the same every week, okay, TCU and Florida State both won in the week that TCU jumped Florida State. So what the hell? If the previous rankings don't mean anything, if it's a reset every week, well, then I don't get it. There's a lot of things I don't get.
Here, looking at last week's rankings and this week's rankings. Teams that dropped 3 spots, because TCU, again, they won by 52 points. They dropped 3 spots. Arizona lost by 40 to Oregon. They only dropped 3 spots. Kansas State lost by, 13 to Baylor?
Something like that, yeah.
They dropped 2 spots. Georgia Tech only dropped 1 spot after losing to – Wisconsin dropped 5 after getting eviscerated by Ohio State. But you're going to drop TCU 3 spots?
For winning.
And they moved Mississippi State up 3 spots for not playing.
Yeah, I know.
Ole Miss moved up 3 spots by not playing.
I know. I can't sit here and say I think that Ohio State, Baylor, TCU, all were deserving of a playoff spot. No question about it. And honestly, in all the years I've watched Buckeyes football, I had never seen them play that type of game like they played on Saturday night against Wisconsin. It was just the most dominant performance over a quality opponent I've ever seen this team put together, ever. It was amazing. And I understand that could vault them past one of these teams, which is fine, I suppose. No rankings from the previous week, sure. Ohio State, yeah, they absolutely deserved a playoff spot after seeing what we saw on Saturday. But TCU, granted it wasn't against the same quality of opponent, but they did nothing wrong. They did nothing to deserve being dropped 3 spots. It's as simple as that.
I mean, that's the thing, is that's again, that would come back to it, but that's my problem. TCU didn't do anything. What changed? What changed? What made TCU 3 spots worse?
Well,
what made Baylor, better than them over the last week?
Well,
I understand Ohio State playing their way in because they played amazingly and they've come on super strong, and that was, incredibly impressive. 3rd-string quarterback, conference championship game, Heisman Trophy candidate on the other side. Full marks to Ohio State. I would be fine if it was, say, Ohio State 4 and Baylor. If Baylor was 5, I'd have less of a problem with it, I guess. But even then, you'd still drop them 2 spots and out. Because.
It has to be, taking like crazy conspiracy theories and stuff out of the mix, it has to be the fact that there was that 13th game. That had to make a difference. They had one more chance to lose. All 3 of the teams in front of, all 4 actually, of the teams in the playoff all had one more chance to lose, and they all went out and did what they were supposed to do in their championship games. That's all I can think of, and if that's the reasoning for it, I'm fine with that too. But again, if the rankings don't mean anything, then don't release the rankings. Tell ESPN, you know what? It's great television. It gives talk show hosts and podcasts and everybody a lot of good stuff to talk about. But it sure looks like you screwed a team with this, and if they don't mean anything, then don't put them out. That's the only way you can solve it,
right.
Or go to 8 teams. And
I can't support 8. 8's too much.
I agree.
If you throw Michigan State against Alabama, come on. Mississippi State against Oregon's probably a good game.
Maybe.
TCU against Florida State's probably. The rest of those games are probably good, but this is an anomaly of a year. Like, this normally doesn't happen like this, too. I think 6 teams is probably the best way for them to eventually go. We've kind of exhausted talking about the teams and what happened, but what ways would you want to fix it? Like, are you good with keeping the 4, just 4 forever?
I'm fine. I like the 4 because it's so do or die. And
right.
Every game we've seen it happen. We've seen it play out since about the 5th week of the season. We've had what we call elimination games. They're very important. As long as you can keep, I'm for anything that keeps the regular season excitement level at where it was at this year. An 18 playoff, unless you use the one I've always talked about, probably doesn't do that because all of a sudden, Ohio State, sure, they should beat Michigan. It's a rivalry game and all that, but if you put it into an 18 playoff and all that, they can go into that Michigan game. It doesn't mean as much. They can still lose because they've still got the head-to-head, blah, 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 blah. 6 teams probably works in this case, but here's another question, though. Let's take this. I think I brought this up on the boards, too. If everything remains the same except Baylor and TCU have 2 losses instead of the 1, we're not having this discussion.
Yeah.
So is this just an anomaly of a year where we had 6 teams deserving for 4 spots? Or is this going to happen every year? Before I'm ready to trash the whole thing, I got to see if this continually keeps happening.
Well, yeah, I don't think that they're never going to change it after the first year,
right?
But it's definitely something to get some more data on because this could just be an anomaly where you have a lot of good teams this year. You just do.
I like it. I just wish that I honestly would feel better today. I would have had no issue whatsoever if TCU had held on to that 4th spot. I would have not complained one bit. Because of the prior rankings. I didn't. I love the fact that my team's in there. I didn't like the way we got there. That's the problem I have with it.
Yep.
And it's been great. It's been a fantastic thing.
Do you hold any weight in the conspiracy theory that if it was not Baylor and TCU, if it was Texas and Oklahoma, that they would have stayed in instead because of fan bases? That Ohio State moved up simply because
I don't know.
Popular college football team.
I don't know if I'm going to put a lot of weight into it, but you know what? It's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. I think
they do it with the regular bowls all the time.
I said this too. I put it on Facebook and on the boards. I said, okay, you're the committee. You're going into this thing on Sunday morning, right? You've got to screw 2 fan bases. Who are you going to screw? 5,000 TCU fans, 5,000 Baylor fans, or 11 billion Ohio State fans?
Right.
You know? Mm-hmm. Who are you going to get the most flack from if you do this? I can guarantee you. Because Ohio State fans are idiots. They would have lost their minds. Even though I think a perfectly legitimate argument could have been made that they had no business being there. And I'd go right if they had not made it and people had complained, I would have said, you know what, you should have beaten Virginia Tech and we're not having this discussion. Simple as that.
Yeah. And God, if they didn't lose to Virginia Tech, they'd probably be 3 or 2.
Or maybe even 1 if they're 13-0 right now.
Might just be 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. Everybody's like, oh, they've got a shot against Alabama. I've heard that all before. I've been down this road.
I don't think so. I just it's great that you made the playoff, but this is also why I kind of wanted the traditional Rose Bowl type matchup thing, where they would move Ohio State up to 3. I think because really I was convinced that's why they moved Florida State to 4.
So they can be like, perfect sense.
Look, we're doing this now so that people don't freak out next week when we do it. But we're doing it now so that you set it up and you kind of ease people into the fact that you're going to try and set up these traditional matchups or regional matchups so we can sell more tickets to the games. I'd be okay with that. I would love to see Alabama, Florida State. I'd love to see Oregon, Ohio State. I would have loved to see Oregon, TCU. I would have loved to see any of those games. But now I think you're going to have one good semifinal and one awful one. I think Alabama's going to beat up Ohio State.
I have to probably agree, but I will say this, and I'm not making excuses. Well, I am kind of making excuses for my team. Before we all jump on the Ohio State sucks, blah, blah, blah thing and this and that again after they get beat by Alabama, do you really think Baylor or TCU would have fared any better? That's all I'm going to say.
I think Baylor or TCU could score the points. And I think TCU had a better defense than Baylor, obviously. I think TCU would have a better shot.
But that's the thing, though. But do you think either one of those teams, of the 3 that were possibly the number 4 team, do you think any one of them would have beaten Alabama?
Maybe TCU. I think TCU would have the best shot.
Well, see, I mean, I think Ohio State's got a puncher's chance. I'll tell you what, if the team that showed up that played Wisconsin on Saturday night shows up, they're going to beat Alabama because I've never seen a team play that well. It was amazing.
Think about what Cardell Jones has to go through. His very first start for the Ohio State Buckeyes was in the Big Ten championship game against a ranked team, and they blew him out. So your second start is now going to be in a national semifinal
against
in the
Alabama.
Superdome against Alabama.
Right. Yeah, have fun with that. Well, you know what, though?
And you're going to have Nick Saban versus Urban Meyer. I mean, that's a great storyline, and those guys know pretty much all you could know about each other, in terms of college football.
I don't know. I mean,
you think Urban has any tricks up his sleeve to get to Nick Saban in Alabama?
It doesn't matter. You can have all the tricks up your sleeve that you want. If you don't have the talent, it's just not going to make a bit of difference. No. We've seen a lot of teams try to play tricks, but Alabama, I think they're cut above everybody myself. But it's I don't know. I don't think Ohio State's going to get blown out. I think it's going to be more like when they played LSU a few years back, where it was like 37-20 or something like that. It's not going to be a horrible 66-0 blowout, but I will say this too: if they're going to win this thing, if they've got a shot, you got to get past Alabama to make it legit to me. So, in my crazy fantasy world, beating Alabama, going on to win the whole thing, that shuts everybody up about them getting in. I just don't think that's going to happen. But it's overall, I'm very happy with it. The thing that bothers me the most about the playoff thing this year is it was so controversy-free up until the last week.
Yeah. Well, and really just because of that one thing.
Yeah.
Is dropping TCU 3 spots.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing. Everything else worked out fine. Overall, first year of having the college football playoff, it's better for college football.
Oh, absolutely.
Just from top to bottom. It made the whole thing so much more it's exciting and engrossing, and there was just so much more to talk about. You always had the rankings, but really the rankings didn't mean anything. I mean, you had the BCS, but it was only about the top 2.
Well, yeah,
and the computers were lifeless and kind of this is what it is, straightforward the whole time, and you knew exactly what you were going to get. And because it was a computer, you couldn't really have any discussion against it. It's like, well, that's what the computer said.
Here's the thing.
People can be like, oh, well, stupid computers, what do they know? And it's like, well, I mean, you can't really change it. It's a computer. It does what it does. But this is a group of human beings that we can kind of break down their decisions or why they did it or, criticize them or, figure out their thought process.
Well, and using our own criteria that we used for a lot of the season where we thought they were going to put a premium on conference championships, they did exactly that.
They did, and they obviously care about the outright championships more than a co-championship. I mean, that's clear. And don't think for a second that the Big 12 is not already processing that waiver form to make a college conference championship game next year.
Simple solution too is grab a Boise State and maybe like a Colorado State and expand to 12 teams and don't worry about it.
I read where it wouldn't be those two. The ones that were being discussed are like Memphis and Cincinnati.
Oh, for God's sakes! Memphis and Cincinnati should be in the freaking MAC. Come on.
Yeah.
Maybe Cincinnati's a little bit better. We'll move them up to the American Athletic Supporter Conference or whatever the hell it's called.
Right. We did all that conference realignment, before, and I don't know what teams you could bring in to make the Big 12 better, other than just being like, well, we need 12 teams.
I think Boise State's a nice addition to the Big 12.
But the thing that you have to remember too is it's for all sports. It's not just a football thing.
That's right. Yeah. Unless you're Notre Dame.
Well, yeah, but Notre Dame's special.
I don't know. I'm really
its own special unicorn.
I like I said, I think that after the
Big 12 should have done is just blown up like everyone thought they were going to do and split in half and go between the Pac-12. Like throw Oklahoma, the two Oklahomas, and then Texas and I guess TCU or Baylor or whoever.
Yeah, it was a great regular season. This thing, one of my biggest arguments against the playoff for years was that it would diminish the importance of the regular season. It did anything but.
It heightened it. I think it heightened it.
Absolutely. And again, the only problem I have was at the controversy at the very end. It's going to be fun. I still think 8 teams can work, but anyway.
I think I guess
you do it right.
I need more evidence. I need a couple more years before I go to 8, because I was always for 8, because I was always going along with your model of, well, yeah, you just pick the 5 conference champions and then the group of 5 champion and then 2 at-large teams. But I didn't even think about it in the way that some people were saying. Well, if it's just conference championships, then the rankings don't matter. And the rankings would matter for seedings and then the at-large teams.
Well, see, my plan, that isn't my plan, though. My argument, my playoff plan was always the 6 highest ranked conference champions, meaning like if the ACC derped their way to a 7-5 champion, guess what? You stay home, and Boise State, Mountain West, or whatever hell conference they're playing, and now they get to go in your place. So it kept the importance of the regular season alive, because it wasn't just if I win my conference, I get in. No, you had to be ranked in the top 16 or above to get in. So, this year it would have made a bit of difference, but there were years where, like, an ACC champion would have never even sniffed my playoff, whereas Boise State would have made it, and then the 2 at-large, simple as that.
I think that's not so much of a problem now that the Big East doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
There's the American Conference, but they're not part of the Big 5 anymore.
But you know what I mean?
I think the only conference where you're ever going to really have that sort of thing happen is maybe the ACC, where Florida State has a couple down years.
Right.
But it's not likely anymore, I don't think.
Well, this could have been a lot worse. I mean, as bad as things were in the last week, imagine if Mississippi State wins out. Now, all of a sudden, are we looking at 2 SEC teams, Oregon?
Yeah.
And, 2 SEC teams and Oregon and Florida State. Then you got Ohio State, Baylor, and TCU all having a shit fit at this point. So it's, you're right, though. You've got 5 spots, or 5 what they call Power 5 conferences for 4 spots. Someone's going to get screwed every year. And there is going to be the year where the SEC puts 2 teams in this thing. And then what?
And then you're going to have 2 conferences bitching.
Right. So I really do. I've seen people like, we need a 32-team playoff. No, we really don't.
This isn't FCS. The other thing is, it's just not feasible.
No.
You can't do that. Not with the bowl system. Unless you just get rid of bowls. And that's never going to happen because it makes too many schools too much money.
Right. Yeah.
Boise State, they are the group of 5 representative in the bowls. They will play in the Fiesta Bowl against who do they play in the Fiesta Bowl? Arizona.
I like the fact that Boise's making one of the big bowls, but why does it always have to be the Fiesta Bowl?
I know.
Can't we put them somewhere else just once?
No. They've been to only the Fiesta Bowl, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. They had.
You know what though? Even when we've had some of the other teams, Northern Illinois made the Orange Bowl.
Oh God, was that a mistake? But yeah,
that was awful. Hawaii was in the Sugar Bowl that one year. Utah went to the Fiesta Bowl the first time,
right?
And then they beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl the second time. I remember that game. That was
so do I.
Nuts. I just remember, Utah, Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Yeah, no big deal. Oh wait, Utah beat them by 20 points.
Yeah, well, that was just a case of Alabama just had no desire to be there.
Yeah, but yeah, regular season is done in college football. Now the students have to go take their finals, so we get a week off. Although
Cardale Jones, he ain't there to.
That's right. He's the guy that was there.
He's not there to play school, man. He's there to play football, so he won't be showing up for those finals.
Well, he better play school if he wants to play in the playoff. Actually, I forgot. We're not done with the regular season. Army-Navy.
Love watching the Army-Navy game.
Not the most important game. 6-5 Navy and 4-7 Army.
I tell you what, Army a few years ago for that game came out with, I think, was probably my favorite college football uniform ever. They had the digital camouflage helmet, the black jersey, digital camouflage pants. That thing was killer. Yeah. Awesome.
Yep. So Army-Navy, this one is in Baltimore.
Cool. I'll be tuning in.
If you're an American that loves football, you gotta watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
You gotta watch the Army-Navy game. Come on. But yeah, I mean, that's the end of the regular season here in college football. Got the couple weeks off before the bowls, and we got a full month before our first ever Division I A FBS college football playoff matchups. Can't wait.
I can't either. It's going to be awesome. Again, like I said all along, I loved every minute of this except for the minor. Well, it's not even minor, but except for the controversy at the end. It has been a fantastic regular season. Anything else before we head off into the sunset, Greg? Go Bucks. You got a month to say go Bucks. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna let me rephrase that. Go Packers. There we go. Go Colts. Come on, look good, guys. Try to win at least one playoff game again. That'd be nice. Come on, Johnny Football. Get us at least 20 points next week. Yeah, that'll be fun. For Greg, I'm Zach. This has been basically a football show. We'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the football.